So here we have our disc sanders, and then over here we have our spindle sanders. So these are all of our power sanders, and these rules apply to all power sanders. So a few things about our disc sanders: the on-off switch is right here on top of the machine. Here's the table, and then the sandpaper is here. And so the sandpaper will spin in a circle. So at the disc sander, this is specific to the disc sander. Since it is a circle, half of it is spinning in the upward direction, while the other half is spinning in the downward direction. So one of your safety rules specifically for the disc sander is when using the disc sander, keep material on the side of the sander that is spinning downward toward the table. Okay, this is a safety rule because if you were to let go of your material and you're on the upward side, your material is going to be flipped up. If you accidentally let go of your material on the downward side, it's actually going to keep your piece of material on the table. So it's more safe to use the side that is going downward. So make sure we're using the downward side of the disc sander. A few parts on the spindle sander. So right here is your on-off switch. This sandpaper should actually be completely covering the rubber stop like this one. And so this actually spins and also moves up and down. So a spindle sander is used to sand a curved surface. So if we were to have this area cut out, we would use the spindle sander to smooth out this curve. On the spindle sander, you want to make sure you're using the side that is spinning away from you. So since it's a circle again, half of it will be spinning towards you, while the other half will be spinning away from you. So make sure you're using the side that is spinning away from you. So same thing, if you accidentally let your material go, it's going into the wall versus going into you. Okay, second safety rule with the power sanders is to never use excessive pressure when sanding a workpiece. You always want to let the machine do the work for you. So this is really, really important because sometimes we get in a rush when we're sanding and we think that if we push harder, it's going to go a lot faster. Okay, number one, it's more dangerous. Number two, usually it'll go too fast to where you go too far, okay? Or it'll actually just burn your material, so then you have to sand off the burn mark, and then you probably went too far. So when you're using a sander, you want to make sure that you're just using normal pressure. You're just putting that material up against the sander and not pushing too hard, but yet not keeping it too light. So you'll just ride it along the sander and keep it moving. If you're using excessive pressure, you can slip into it, like I said. And if you've ever filed your nails, it's pretty similar. So a nail file is kind of like sandpaper. And so it takes like 1 minute to file your nail until you're like, holy cow, I went too far. Sandpaper is like a nail file times 1,000. Okay, it's moving at a much higher speed and it's a lot more rougher. So not only can it go through nail, it can go through skin and really injure your hands. So you want to make sure you're not using excessive pressure. Next one is to, when sanding your workpiece, keep the material flat against the table. So this is really important because like I said, at the disc sander, the downward side is moving down towards the table. That'll help keep it on the table. And if you're lifting it up from the downward side of the table and you accidentally let go, you could get your fingers pinched underneath of it. So make sure it's flat on the table. Also for the spindle sander, keep it flat on the table. If you're here holding your piece up, you're at more of a risk to once again get injured because this is moving up and down and it could just pull your piece down, which would cause your fingers to go into the sandpaper or for your fingers to get pinched as well. During the sanding process, the movement of the abrasive sandpaper against the material being sanded creates friction, which then creates heat. So, keep in mind that after you sand a surface, it is going to be warm. So a lot of the times we want to sand, and then feel right away if it's sanded smooth enough. So make sure you give it a minute, especially if you've been at the machine for a few minutes, and you caution yourself. Tap it a little bit, see if it's warm, and then go ahead and feel if it's smooth. Next safety rule is to keep fingers 2 inches from the abrasive surface. So this is the exact safety rule for the scroll saw and the bandsaw. Keep your fingers and hands 2 inches from the surface. So I don't want my hands too much closer than this when using the sander. And this just comes back to being safe in general. Like I said, the sandpaper can go through skin, nail, anything on your hands. So you just want to keep that safe distance from the sandpaper. And then lastly is keep your material moving. Do not hold your material in one place. Okay? Sandpaper causes friction, which causes heat, which can eventually just burn your material. Okay, this is wood. We know wood burns. Right here is an example of a burn mark. And if you have any of those burn marks on your project, you will have to sand them off. So make sure that you don't hold it in one place. You have consistent pressure, but not excessive pressure, and you're moving it along side to side. If you have any questions about any of the sanders, be sure to let me know.